What we would like to see is that there's a difference in role between the Chief Privacy Officer, the Data Officer, and the CISO. We want those to be unique and distinct roles so we don't have to choose which hat we're going to wear each day. Then moving down, the next thing is we want to do a privacy assessment, right? We want to know what that baseline is, and we want to know exactly where we are at this point in time, and then take that and build our strategic roadmap from there. After that, what we're going to do is when we do that, then we're going to start on the mission of getting everybody associated with what we're up to. We're going to train our executive, can I say that? We're going to train our executive team and all of our subordinate IT team all the way through the board so we don't have to make difficult decisions in the middle of the breach. We will have done all of that pre-breach so that we can work more effectively. Last one, again, she said we had a table full of overachievers, and indeed we did. And then the last thing is what we want to do is cultivate a culture of risk. We want risk to permeate through all aspects of the organization, irrespective of which discipline that they occupy. We all need to be in this together. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay. Perfect. Next. So?
Yes, of course, you have to get all that in the notes.
Good job.
Cheers.
Another overachiever. I say three.
Okay, so my table was, what was it again? Cyber insurance and data protection. And we talked like 90% of the time about cyber insurance and all the problems and the challenges and the difficulties, starting with the Zurich CEO's recent statement about cyber insurance or cyber risk becoming uninsurable and whether that's truly a problem. I think we kind of came to the conclusion that that might have been some banter, if you will, or whatnot, because at the same time, there's a push to get federal backstopping for cyber insurance, for systemic risk. So we don't think really that there's a problem with cyber insurance going away, as much as that we're going to continue to see this hardening of the market as far as the internal controls, the security controls, and all of the other things that are going to be required. So really, the lesson to be learned from that is that all of this push from the insurance carriers to have these controls, these are really basic hygiene kind of stuff that you should have anyway. So don't necessarily treat this as a bad thing when they're coming to you saying you need all these controls in place. Recognize they're coming up with these controls based upon actual losses they've paid out. So they're finding where the losses are. They're giving you kind of a priority. And also understand that many of these controls are things you've been wanting to do as security professionals anyway. You just haven't been able to get buy-in from the business unit or budget to do it. When you go to them and tell them, hey, by the way, we can't get cyber insurance unless we do all these things I've been telling you to do before, you now have more leverage to try to get that done. So the security controls can be a good thing if you use them properly. Don't get all offended because they're telling you how to secure your environment. Have a dialogue with them. Treat that first application you get as the opening of the conversation and go from there to more and more conversational approach, because what they're really trying to do is assess and understand your business risk. And the better job you do of presenting that, the better coverage you're going to be able to get in the end, and the better you're going to be able to protect your business. So that's one thing that's really not even on my notes. Security controls are good. Okay. Number two. When we're looking at our business risk like this, we have to break down the silos. We have to truly take this as a team approach and get buy-in from all throughout the organization. What led to this is our discussion about data, our data protection part. Our data is the focus, okay? Data is where we need to keep our eyes focused when we're talking about data protection and cybersecurity from a legal and regulatory risk standpoint. Because ultimately, that's all the regulators care about, is how you're protecting the data within your environment. So, the first most important question companies generally need to assess is, do you have a data map? Do you know what data you have? Where it's being stored, how it's being protected, who has access to it, how it comes into your environment, how it's processed within your environment, and then ideally how you get it out of your environment. So have that data map, number one. Number two, one of the most effective tools you can use for reducing your overall risk in this area is, if you don't need your data, if you have old data from 30 years back about old employees, who, by the way, are going to be the first ones to sue you, get rid of it. Okay? Securely get rid of the data, get it out of your environment.
Now, come on,
And
I'm going
because
to ask, I'm going to interrupt and say, how easy is that?
I don't care.
It's not.
How easy is it to know what data you have, Rob?
Well, yeah, that's another problem.
Okay, you know what happens when you have a data breach?
It's
And you come to me, you know what the first question I ask you is? What data do you have? You've got to answer it, because you have to notify all those people. It's a lot easier to do now than it is to do then. So, I'm going to leave you with this. This is the one thing I want you all to remember. Ready? I need you to remember to focus on your data, okay? And how are we going to remember that? Repeat after me, all of you. Data is the hot potato. Okay? Data is the hot potato. Come on, let me hear you. Data is the hot potato.
Yeah, okay, so we're living in fantasy land at this point. Okay.
You got to do it in a breach.
No, but I mean, he's right. We all know that. It's just, okay. Another one.
We did 4 as well, but the last one's a 10. So ours was creating an organizational risk playbook. And so first thing that we said you got to do is just figure out how your org views risk. So if you're a software development company, technology is everything, like you were probably the conversation on the risk board. If you're manufacturing, you may be one of many pillars of risk that the organization is looking at. So figure out how to plug the cyber component of risk into your risk conversation and speak in terms that your business understands. If it's EBITDA, if it's money flow, if it's whatever, speak in those terms. Second one is once you figure out how you plug in, create a clear plan and process for risk mitigation. How do you own it? How do you time box it? What's your exception process look like? How are you going to track it? All those things. Make sure that that's clear, everybody understands it, and it's communicated well throughout the organization. Lastly, add third-party risk into that. And so there was a lot of discussion around third-party risk. It's how do you make it more than just some questionnaires that you throw out and get back? So you probably got to prioritize certain vendors. You probably need to use some tools to help you track that. Also, it may be used low-level identification for you. And and if you're seeing vendors that are behaving badly, also, it's a great suggestion by Brian. What they were doing is, hey, you come back the second year, you haven't mitigated a lot of that risk. Great, I'm going to up your indemnity or I'm going to up your liability and put more of it back on that vendor to give them the pressure to go and remediate it. And then the last one is more, was a tip that was thrown out there, which I think is a really good tip. Make sure that your risk process has a communication pathway or channel back to your incident response and threat intelligence process, since those guys are giving each other feedback and maybe you're identifying some risks that you didn't know when you're looking at what's happening in your incident response teams.
Thank you, Scott.
Alright, so we have 2.5, so shout out to those of you who are overachievers and report those events. But I think ours kind of fit in with the rest of the world. So our table was a kind of a mix of topics around data protection and also organizational risk. So we started with trying to define what is data protection, right? What is data protection actually striving to do? And the one-liner that we came up with was that data protection is the bridge between risk and enablement. All right. So I will repeat that. That data protection is the bridge between risk and enablement. That I've got on one side of it, I have what my business is trying to do, right? The business is trying to generate revenue. They're not trying to make your life hard, but they are trying to do something that pushes the business forward. And on the other side, I have my risk teams, my privacy teams, my legal teams, the folks that are also trying to protect the business at the same time. And data protection is that line of engineering and tooling and innovation that can help these things actually work together. The other side of this that we talked about was around tabletops and war games. That tabletops and war games help drive your resiliency. That can factor into some of your regulatory requirements, your insurance requirements, your security controls, but that resiliency is making sure that multiple lines of business, multiple executive partners all have a role inside of cybersecurity and data protection. That they know what their role is, and when you present them with this idea that, hey, this critical vendor, this vendor that is the backbone of how we're generating revenue is suddenly gone, it's making them think about, what do I do in that case? Not just a pen and paper disaster recovery of how do I move freight if I can't get a hold of this vendor, but who am I replacing them with? Is there somebody that I can put in the place of my payroll vendor or my timekeeping or something like that?
So I have a question on that. So about how do you make that focus?
So some of that can be through a resiliency program, right? Like enterprise resiliency that kind of brings in the disaster recovery side, the business continuity side, the risk side of data protection and cybersecurity, kind of brings it into one program. Have that person who's in charge of that, have that person who has the ear and is in front of your executive board, who can keep interjecting that there is a problem here and here's how we can try to solve it. And here's how I get budget for it, here's how I get tooling for it, that sort of thing. And so my hack point is being creative in those tabletops. We had some really cool tips at our table around using observers, so somebody who's not familiar with necessarily what's going on at that strategic leader level, who's sitting there observing what's happening in the tabletop and taking notes, because you'll get some really cool perspectives that way. Some other ideas around polling the participants as it's going, like, hey, what do you think is happening next? What do you think the next part of the process is? And your next inject helping answer that question. So some ways to keep it interactive, to keep people's attention, and keep them thinking about what's happening. That's ours.
So any questions from Amanda? You're off the hook.
Hey guys, my name is Vidya. I work data analytics. Two things I want to say. First is, can you hear me? Are we good? Okay. Can you guys hear me in the back? Yes. Apparently there was no captain in my team. So I was volunteered, anointed, whatever. Not of my own volition, nobody else was brave enough. So bear with that. So let me put my three, our topics were data protection, cyber insurance. I'm going to put it out in the top. And actually, this is great. I'm a data guy. My handwriting is so bad. Even I cannot read it 10 minutes later. But that's by design, data encryption. seriously, anyone can meet at least. So we come actually extensively about cyber insurance. We debated a lot of it, and a couple of 2 or 3 interesting viewpoints, but I'll try to sum it up. The gist is that it's needed, it's a necessary evil. Apologize for any insurance guys. But it's needed, but the key thing was do the due diligence, put a valuation. Right? If your cyber insurance company tells we value $50 million, and you think, no, your exposure is a lot more, maybe you don't need cyber insurance. I'm not saying you do, but think about it. Yeah, food for thought, right? So do the due diligence, see what the valuation is cyber insurance worth it? It probably is to some degree, but I don't know what degree. Second thing was data protection, backups, DLP controls, the whole slew of controls. I'm a data guy, and this is what I tell everyone. I work a lot with security guys. Depending on the day of the week, time of the day, security guys are my best friends of my worst enemies. They want to protect everything, and I'm not joking. I have one use case. We wanted to get data from the internet, bring it to the cloud, POS terminals. One of the security guys said, believe it or not, he's not a good judge.
But the microphone in your mouth.
He actually said, bring it back to on-prem, subject it to all our controls, push it to the cloud.
Wow.
I'm not going to comment on this.
Wait, sorry, what was that?
No.
He said, bring all this data from the POS terminals, bring it down to your on-prem systems, do all the IP, IIDs, all the detective preventive controls, then ship it to the cloud.
You know, you're here, kid. You love that, right? Yeah. No, that's what I was like. I wanted to see if I heard it right. That's like,
I'm not going to comment, but I say this because I understand the perspective. If there's a breach, reputational risk, financial risk, all the compliance, all the problems, you're on the hook. I get that. But it's a dialogue, guys. Okay. Last, we have 1 minute. Okay. So anyways, this is what it all comes down to. With the right sense of control, culture is important. Do your developers in India, Ukraine, or China, wherever they are, all over the world, do they understand what an SSN means and what a breach of an SSN means? It's education, training, it's important, right? That's a key fact. Culture is a key fact. Last thing, it's all about the money, guys. I'll just leave it at this one. Some of you guys know this. I'm a Pink Floyd fan. There's this song which says money is a crime. I don't quite agree with that. Money is why we're all here, right? I'll leave it at that.
Very profound statement. Jeanette?
Okay, since Scott and team did such an excellent job describing their process, our team is going to leave you with 4 key thoughts. And we talked about the process in terms of how you initiate, how you plan, and you execute. So from an initiate perspective, the key thought is that it's necessary to make sure your board is properly educated about risk and that they all have common language. Because if they don't, and they're not asking you about these things, they're not asking you and begging you for quarterly updates, you know you're in trouble.
So anybody want to raise a glass on that?
amen.
Hallelujah. Let's see, Scott, are you in the number 3 row?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to put myself right with Scott here. All right, from a planning perspective, courtesy of our GM brethren back there, calibrating and talking about the risk, whether your organization is by product, by process, by function, making sure that you're calibrating is going to be of vital importance. Because you have to monetize it if it's going to be real for anybody. If you don't monetize it, nobody's going to hear you about the money you need to solve it. And the last thought is during the execution phase, making sure that once you've raised those risks and you've surfaced a risk register, that every quarter you go back to your executive team and your board and you tell them what's good, what's better, and what's worse every single quarter, so that they know how the money you invested improved the operation and benefited the enterprise, and so that they know where they're going to have to spend money next. Finally, make sure you know what your triggers are for making change. What drives the change to the risk register? What are your triggers? Is it merger and acquisition activity? Is it economic? Is it regulatory? Know your triggers. And with that, I'm giving the microphone back to Rob.
Let's give a hand again, I know, to all of our table. Oh, well, why weren't you up here?
The table of the talent and the performance with all the talented people out there. This was a great discussion. So our topic was talent and performance are going to come up. You don't get to escape that. Where was it? Data is the heart for data? Yes. True? Yes. Yep. Data is also what powers everything, including everything that we do. So one of the data that we have seen, 30% of our workforce in the next 5 years is going to be Gen Z. In the next another 10 years, we're looking at Gen Z being the primary workforce. So when we spoke about talent and performance, we focused on how to get Gen Z, how to hire Gen Z, and how to retain Gen Z. How do you want to take the next? Go for it.
Sure. So the next one that we discussed was how do you manage talent for performance, right? I think one of the things is the gap that exists between the managers and the talent itself. And one of the things we discussed was how to be in tune with the employee. I think it's very, very important that we understand, give them the voice, understand their priorities, their values, and what actually motivates the employee. So we talked about being in tune with the employee to be one of the key factors. The third thing we said was, since it's going to be Gen Z, pretty much 30 to 40% in the next 5 years or so, the current management style doesn't work. So we as managers have to change the way we manage the workforce, right? The old ways of managing employees is going to change because the way they work, the way they perceive things, the way they think that is what is more important for them, and how they walk towards a particular goal or milestone. So we as managers have to change. So I think one of the discussion points was what kind of management style do we want to bring in so that we change ourselves to manage the workforce.
Then we changed a little bit, not just as Gen Zs, that's true for everybody, right? I mean, we all have, especially in IT, all of us deal with diverse skills. And it's not just Gen Zs, even us. We've got to be interested in what we are doing. Learning and development is a key factor in retaining every employee, including Gen Z. But sometimes that learning and development comes by lifting your teams by bringing in the third-party data, bringing in suppliers, bringing in newer energy to your teams.
So tell me, how are you encouraging your team members to educate themselves, to invest in themselves every single day?
Yeah, there's no one single answer, but we're doing it financially rewarding them so that that's their progression because world is changing, everything is becoming, whether it is cloud or whatever the latest technology. So one is financially motivating them to get there. And then the second thing is also challenging them with projects that they can work on because many times people want to learn and they don't know how to apply that. We all want to learn something, but unless you're giving them the opportunity to use that particular knowledge. So we're pairing people with actual work that they can perform as they start learning something different. And for us, learning is not just technology, right? We're not only advocating technology learning. It's behavioral learning, managerial learning, working with different teams. So it's a combination of soft as well as the hard skills that are required. And we've seen some success in pushing people around. While I know learning, we kind of opened the taps to say anybody can learn anything and there's no constraint, but then giving them the opportunity to use it becomes very critical.
I'll add to that, right? I believe IT is the business. There are gone are the days when IT was an enabler of the business. today IT is the business. One way, what Arvind touched is all the technology and skills per se. I think another way to motivate and make your people learn is bring them closer to business. Do not lock them into an area. And again, with hybrid teams, it's very easy to say you keep working on your networking side, you keep working on your security side. That's what you're supposed to know. Educate your teams in business. Tell them why. Make them understand how they add to the bottom line of your business and what are they contributing. Mostly in that case, it will motivate them and also make them learn what you are doing and why. And that I've seen usually helps.
Let's give him a hand. Boy, I don't think we can top this, okay? This was probably the most fabulous event we've had. And therefore, when Leah has another advisory call and gets information from our advisors, and if you want to be an advisor, it's free. All you have to do is make sure we have your contact information. We'll put you on the advisory council on the website. You know, we need input. We need this community. We need to serve each other. We need to support each other. We used to do that many years ago. So let's bring it back. And that's what this group is all about, okay? So, enough of my preaching. So, thank you. I just have one more thing to say. April 12th is the next DFW Elevate Exchange Happy Hour. And hold your socks, because Jody Davids, who's the former CIO of PepsiCo, and Sarah Andrews, who's CISO for Experian, and a board member of Marvel Technologies, but also, Jody is a board director. She gets paid for being a board director. I put that together as a fireside chat, okay, in order, and it's about board preparedness. Okay, so, you know, you might want to come. It's probably a good idea, right? So it's, you know, you're either going to be probably thrust into an employee independent position somewhere as we go along with all the types of SEC issues and whatever comes down the pipe. I would think you wouldn't want to be like crossing your legs and going, what do I do, Mom? Right? So show up April 12th. We'll put out the invitation. You're welcome to join us. I really think this was the goal I had for Elevate Exchange, is to be really on the cutting edge and on the front end. And a lot of the topics, the 3 topics today, all came from our advisory council. And they are the top of mind. So that's going to continue. We're going to have another call. You're going to be an influencer in what we do after the April 12th gig. Okay? Everybody, we don't close till 8:30. Have another glass of wine. I don't think there's any food left. I think we ate it all. Oh, and also,